Ladies, gentlemen, and monsters of all ages, I love Monster Hunter, and I think it's fair to say if you're watching this, you probably do too. I've been playing the games in this series for nearly 6 years now, which is crazy for me to say, considering I started playing them, well, on this channel, in front of all of you. You've been able to see my entire journey with this series from start to end. You've watched me go back and play earlier games that released long before I first started playing Monster Hunter, and you've seen me play recent releases as they drop. You've even been right alongside me as we delved into the depths of Monster Hunter Frontier and played that for months on end. Throughout this time, I constantly get questions about my favorite monsters. My most favorite is, well, I would say pretty well known, but those are my top 3. But every so often, someone asks me a relatively simple question: what are my top 10 monsters of all time? And once it gets up to a number like 10, it gets really hard for me to just name off the top of my dome, because it really is quite competitive for me after the first few slots. I've done top 10 lists before, but my most recent one was over a year and a half ago before Sunbreak had even released, so it seems like a good time for me to sit down, pour through the list of monsters, and decide on a top 10 that I'm confident with in the time being. All that said, this is of course my personal top 10, and while some of them are very set in stone, the last few slots honestly change depending on my mood a little bit for that day, because it is genuinely that close. Without further ado then, let's begin at the top with number 10.
I'm sorry, did someone say my name?
Basil Geese. This is a monster that has hovered right around this 10 position for me for a very long time, but the more that I see him around, the more I just absolutely love him. That moment when he first showed up, he wasn't teased, not even the target of the hunt. That's the stuff of absolute legend, as he just descends upon your face. Then he just becomes a top tier invader instantly, popping into any and all hunts that he feels like. Hell, he literally has a mechanic where if a monster roars anywhere on a map that he's on, he has a high chance to just fly over and investigate what's going on over there, which is why it happens constantly where you'll see him just join you in any fight you have. I loved him being in World. I enjoyed his variant in Iceborne, even though it wasn't an invader anymore, but it was when he came back to us in Rise as his base version that I realized how weirdly lonely it felt playing the game without having him around before that point. His existence and the way he works makes him a constant presence, and I love his happy little goblin smile. It just makes me feel like when he comes by to join you in the hunt, he just actually wants to have some fun. He wants to hang out with his friends rather than, you know, kill everything around him. Number 9, Celtis Queen. There's not much to say here that isn't immediately obvious to me, honestly, especially now that I have the context of experiencing it properly through the story of Monster Hunter 4 itself. It's just such a perfect way to introduce an extremely unique and cool monster. First, you see and fight Celtis, base regular Celtis, a very visually pleasing monster, but a little bit of a pushover. Then later on, you meet the Queen, who then full-on combination transforms using the Celtis, taking over its mind and making it assist her in battle. Even without Celtis, she's just this awesome-looking scorpion tank type thing that looks nothing like anything else in the main series, even a little bit. But then you tack on the Celtis, you attach it on the top, you include the fact that she uses the Celtis to fly, while attached to her like some sort of super advanced helicopter technology. Then she also has the rare interaction where she will straight up suck the life out of her own Celtis just to heal herself a little bit before summoning a brand new one to replace it. Just top to bottom, I love this concept, the visuals, the execution of the fight. It's just as a whole so special and unique in a very fun way. Number 8, Shara Ishvalda, the final boss of Iceborne. This absolutely did not disappoint. I have fought a good number of quote-unquote spectacle monsters at this point, the idea of which being that they are obtusely large monsters with ridiculous levels of power that, due to their size, can't really be fought in a standard monster hunting way. And so generally when you have these spectacle monsters, you have to give them a bit of leeway for that fact, but I never found that to be the case with Shara Ishvalda. His mechanics and his fight make it feel like a genuine monster hunting experience the whole way through, not even any siege mechanics or siege weapons at play, and the beauty of this creature, it's nuts. Not to mention the sheer amounts of awe when you first see him in his rock form as something that is completely alien to the Monster Hunter series, and then when you eventually break that form and it peels it off in his beautiful release to show the hauntingly gorgeous creature that's in there, looking like an amalgamation of tree roots with eyes that never stop looking right into your soul. And yes, I've seen people say it's just that the eyes are a flat image instead of actually moving around, but that is the intended effect that creates, and it adds an extra level to the fight too, at least the feeling of it. Not to mention the entire moveset that he has the whole way through, using airwave vibrations as a weapon, vibrating sand into making it work like a liquid almost, the Death Star laser, the Spirit Bomb. This monster is just incredible through and through. Number 7. Rachna Kadaki. This is one of the most recent entries in the series to join my list of favorites, and I think my love for this monster is quite clear. Spider monsters are a rarity in itself. I think spiders are cool in the first place, and this is a very unique type of spider to turn into a monster. I also just find the way that Raknakadaki is built up as a mother of spiders, who then uses her babies for combat, either as a weapon or, far more interestingly, as a movement tool, sort of like a little Spider-Man monster, using them to glide around the zone almost like a hunter does with their wire bugs in Rise and Sunbreak. This let the developers give her some of the most creative and imaginative animations that I have seen in a very long time, and she has so many unique mechanics based around her webbed up body, the way that you can break her various parts multiple times, the way her super attack has multiple versions as well, the whole glowing egg sac thing, and when she uses it like a hammer almost. It's just such an absolutely complete monster that is so far off the beaten path of regular creatures that you would fight. Raknakadaki may be a fire monster, which is the most common element type of monster, but it is the best one by far in my personal opinion, just due to the creativity of it all and how it can be this imaginative while still feeling somewhat grounded in that classic veil of Monster Hunter realism, where it is obviously not something you'd actually see in nature, but just close enough, just explainable enough that your brain can let it slide by. Number 6, Yama-Kurai. Having played Frontier, I gained an extreme appreciation for this specific monster, the origin species of Yamasukami, the giant balloon octopus. Before I'd played Frontier, I always said Yamasukami was one of my favorite monsters of all time just on the pure concept alone, without ever having even experienced the fight myself. Now that I have seen that fight play out, and I have personally played Frontier, I have to say that Yama-Kurai is just a pure upgrade in every way possible as far as I'm concerned. The forest on his back, more populated, and most importantly the fight having so much more actually going on in it. I love Yamasukami because it is just a big floating ball that means no actual harm to living creatures, but inflicted accidentally just because it wants to eat soil, which then will cause it to start growing living things on its back and supporting an ecosystem, which is just such a neat idea. But Yama-Kurai takes that concept and gives it a genuinely cool and enjoyable fight behind it too, no longer a static tower fight, instead an actual open ground mono-a-mono hunt, and it also has things like the ability to change the colors of the leaves on its body to represent the trees on its back going through different seasons as phases of the fight, which is just so cool to see. Number 5.
Damn, I knew I was getting hosed over here.
Coral Puki. I hold to this day that this is the greatest subspecies that has ever been created. Hell, in my opinion, it is straight up the greatest alternate monster version, variation monster, whatever you want to call them. It is the best non-base monster in the entire series to me. It takes the base ideas of Puki as a monster who's a relatively tame little reptilian bird-like forest monster, moves him to the Coral Highlands, which is a dried out ocean floor type biome, and just adjusts him in such incredible ways that it feels like the Coral Highlands was almost designed with him in mind. Even though he was made for Iceborne, the expansion to the game, and the map was in the base game itself. He fits there so perfectly, and is again one of the most creative creatures I have ever seen. Compared to in-game threat level, I think this is the most imaginative fight they've ever done for a monster this quote-unquote early game, a monster this weak, and it pays off so damn well. Aesthetically, it is a beautiful monster, the color scheme really working incredibly, especially with the shift that happens when he's enraged. The moveset is absolutely bananas, from a frontal beam that gets split into 2 beams using his tongue, to things like flying up into the air to shoot water out of his tail in a growing spiral down at you that you have to sort of dodge like a little maze. It's just really genuinely fun, and all shown in almost believable ways on an absolutely gorgeous creature. I love it. Number 4, Namielle. And here's where we get into the real heavy hitters. In the last entry I talked about how the Coral Highlands feels in hindsight like it was almost created with Coral Puki in mind. Well, that goes at least double for Namielle. Aesthetically, she is basically a deep sea creature, a monster from the depths, but turned into a land monster with wings and can fly. A perfect representation of what the Coral Highlands as a whole actually is as a map. But again, she wasn't added until Iceborne, which makes it feel like they left the surprise and reveal to the expansion on purpose, knowing that she needed to exist, but not wanting her to have space too early in the game before the expansion. There are a lot of people who get annoyed by the fight itself, the aspect of the waves on the ground pushing you around and moving you, but I actually love that. Of course, it is a bit irritating in the moment, but it's the concept of this monster who again looks like a deep sea creature but turned into a land animal who lives in an area that is essentially a dried up ocean floor, then returning water to the area to use it to mess around with her landlocked prey, using that same water to form a protective armor around itself, and then the super attack being a massive expulsion of water followed by a giant surge of electricity, then pops all of the water like it's explosive shrapnel, and it almost makes you wonder in that moment how the Coral Highlands came to be. Was it always dry like this, or was there once water that went through a similar process, drying the land but leaving it extremely nutrient rich to support the life that's here? I love this monster so much, and the implications of it for the world. Number 3, Goss Harag. And you may have noticed a theme here. I like wacky creatures, I like silly shapes, I like unique concepts, and while this hasn't come up yet, but as far as real-life animals, I absolutely love bears. They're probably my favorite real-life animal. Incredible, majestic, cuddly killing machines, and while there are a number of bear-like monsters in the Monster Hunter series, the one who captured my heart the most is Goss Harag. Almost like a mix between a polar bear and a demon, he can control ice to the point of creating blades on his hands made purely out of it, making one of the most simultaneously badass and intimidating sights that you'll see in modern Monster Hunter. Sometimes he'll do a badass anime lunge forward with double-bladed arms in an attempt to decapitate you, and sometimes he'll just straight up try and sit on you because he's a big fluffy bear. And that is a dichotomy that I always love with a monster. It's silly yet really terrifying. Not to mention that he changes colors when enraged to look even cooler, and the fact that you can cause knockdowns by breaking his iced up body parts, and even past that, if his enraged naturally times out, he will straight up throw his weapons at you like projectiles. It is just so cool through and through, and as someone who loves bears, he's the best one in the series. Number 2.
An extra bouncy ball.
Zamtrios. Honestly, I've been a bit back and forth whether I wanted to swap this slot with Goss Harag, but I can't bring myself to do it, and there are 2 really big reasons for it. The first is, well, my introduction to the monster. This was like that perfect gateway moment for me early on in my journey with the series, where I realized just how ridiculous and silly Monster Hunter could be sometimes, and I can genuinely pinpoint this moment, which was recorded and documented in a Pro and Noob, as one of the moments that my love for this series increased dramatically. Sharks are awesome, another one of my favorite real-life animals. Highly streamlined predators, sleek shape, sharp edges, gnarly looking face and all that, and Zamtrios is basically just a shark with legs, which is a little funky, but I like funky things. His general moveset, to begin with, is quite fun. The way he burrows around through the ice like he is swimming through a solid is quite cool, and then he hits his second phase where he covers himself in this absolutely awesome ice armor that's spiky everywhere. It makes him look super cool and edgy and dangerous. Up to this point, I had seen the badass side of Monster Hunter, and I had seen some of the silly side of Monster Hunter too, but generally speaking in this series, at least from what I'd experienced up to then, a monster will only be one of those 2 things. Dodogama isn't going to suddenly turn around and pull out the craziest looking supernova you've ever seen, and Fatalis isn't going to roll over and ask for belly rubs. So to me, this moment firmly places him, in my mind, as a monster the developers want you to think is cool, dangerous, and scary, rather than being one that is quirky and silly. But then it happens. He expands. He goes full bouncy rubber ball mode, and it's absolutely just the biggest rug pull in the entire franchise, and it made me instantly fall in love with him as a monster. And I don't think I've ever fallen so deeply for a monster concept that rapidly, especially in the middle of a hunt. Not even at the start or at the end, right in the middle. It's nuts. The other reason I don't want to move him, obviously, is simply that he hasn't had a 5th generation reimagining, and I honestly believe when they do bring Zamtrios back, he could only possibly get bigger and better, so I have high hopes for the future on this one. Number 1, Duramboros. You all knew it would be here. There is no other answer to this question for me, and I would be amazed and, of course, absolutely delighted if they ever do manage to introduce a new monster that I somehow love even more than this guy. I mean, look at him. He's just a giant happy cow. And again, cows are one of my favorite real-life animals. Just chill, soft creatures having a good time, grazing around, eating their grass. Duramboros embodies the spirit of a cow, but he has these beautiful horns. His size itself is insanely large, which I love. He's got these lovely camel humps on his back, and he even grows little bits of moss and mushrooms on his body just because his diet supports it. And another one of my favorite parts about him is what he eats is simply tree bark. He is only aggressive if something invades his territory. He doesn't hunt to kill, otherwise he is a totally chill guy who just sits around knocking trees down with his massive body and then just slowly eating away at them, having a good time. Not to mention his fighting style, which is the literal definition of, I am heavy, so I am just going to throw myself at this thing until it is dead. Literally to the point of using his giant beautiful hammer tail as a counterbalance so that he can spin on his legs like a ballerina before somehow using this momentum to take flight like a helicopter for a brief but glorious moment only to attempt to land on top of you and squish you. It is so ludicrous, but the game takes it so seriously. He doesn't have weird, scary parts of him. He's just a big dude who spins, and the best part of it to me is that he does all of this with a smile on his face. If you look at his big, beautiful face, he always just has the most peaceful smile going on. He never looks like he wants to hurt you or anyone or anything else, and so it almost feels like this is just what he would be doing whether you were there or not. Like spinning for him is just a fun activity that he does in his downtime, and I love him so much just the whole way way through. And that just about does it then for today, everyone. A nice new freshly updated list of my top 10 monsters in the entire series. This list changes more and more the more of the series that I explore and play through, and honestly, even just time itself can change the way that we feel about a monster, like in the case of Basil Geese for me, just getting progressively higher and higher in my mind. I hope you've all enjoyed this then, and of course let me know your own top 10 lists in the comments down below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.